All right. According to my screen, we are live. Welcome back, everyone, to another one of my Lake Talk events. This one's a little different because we're scheduled on a Saturday because I got a really special guest here today. As probably most of you know, I'm hugely influenced by other stillwater fisheries around the world, particularly the UK, being born there myself, but emigrated when I was 7. But in 1997, the World Championships were held in Kamloops, and I believed, in our home waters that we would do well. Well, we got absolutely thrashed. We didn't do very well. And the English team, the UK team, the Welsh, the Scots, the English did really well, and it really opened up my eyes to another way of looking at how to fish still waters, and it's had a huge influence on myself for many years. In recent years, doing more and more YouTube, Rhys Wadley reached out to me. Rhys is based in Wales. He's a Welsh fly fisher, competition fly fisher. He's got an outstanding YouTube channel, Rhys Fishes. I encourage you to watch that. I'll scroll that along the bottom in a little bit. And he introduced me to the Ecstasy Worm last year. We're going to talk about that. But without further ado, let's bring Rhys into the stream, and we can get on here and talk about our upcoming challenge.
Hello.
Welcome, Rhys.
Hello, how are we? You okay?
Good. What time is it over there? Roughly 8 p.m., if I did my time zones correctly?
Correct, yeah. Just gone 8 p.m. here.
It's 1 o'clock in the afternoon here. So we're about, where I am in the mountain time, about 7 hours behind. So this is fun. So you, as I said, you're obviously a fly fisher. You're from Wales. You live in Swansea still, is that correct? Or
yeah, roughly,
okay.
Yes.
All right. And how long have you been fishing like me? Probably since you were old enough to waddle around and.
Yeah, pretty much. I think it's I've done it since I could remember, basically. So my dad did it, so I've done it ever since then, and that's how it's kind of grown, basically.
Yeah, because your dad appears with you from time to time on your videos too, doesn't he?
Yeah, he's becoming much more of a face on the YouTube now than he was maybe 18 months ago. So, but yeah, he is.
So we started out. You approached me. It was kind of a great minds think alike moment, I'd like to think, because I was thinking the same. Our channels have similar size as far as subscribers go. We both got a great interest, obviously, in fly fishing, but particularly stillwater fly fishing. I follow, as I mentioned in the intro, very much influenced by what goes on across the pond, to use the title of our discussion today. And you thought we could reach out and perhaps do something. Now, in the perfect world, to do something was either you come west or I come east, and we spend some time on the water, and that still may happen. I'd still like to do that. I'd like to go back to England and see some things and spend more time on the water than visiting relatives I've never met before or seen in such a long time. But the pandemic didn't allow us to do that. So we thought of and this was sort of inspired by another YouTube channel, Lindsay Simpson, right? You've worked with Lindsay, done a few challenges with him, and we put our minds together, thought, hey, what about a across the pond challenge? And that's what we've done. We decided that we would each tie 10 flies that we use on our own still waters in our own respective countries, send them to each other and see how they do, and film those escapades, if we will, put them up on our channels and see how they go. So that's what we're doing here today. We're going to go through the flies that we each provided. We'll put them up on camera, and we can each talk about them, because my purpose here is to try and make them work as well as I can for you. I'd hate for you to come back and say these things are useless. I couldn't catch a cold with them. So why don't we get started on that? Anything else you'd like to say, Rhys? Or
no, not at all. I'm just nice to be here. Nice to be having a conversation with somebody with a different mindset in some ways, because you look at it differently to us to a certain extent.
Yeah,
we'll both learn some things out of this that maybe through the videos as well, other people will learn.
Yeah, well, we talked about that because your fishery, one of the questions we got, and we could probably bring it in here. I'll just mention the person's name because they put questions in both on Instagram and Facebook. And it was Billy K 032. What would you say is the biggest difference in stillwater fishing from UK to Canada, and we talked about this, didn't we? Because it's different. Like here in my country, we all own our own boats. Typically, we fish out of boats a lot. We buy our license. We go to the different lakes we like to go to. We either carry our boat on our vehicle or inflate it if it's a pontoon boat or a float tube, or we have typically aluminum boats, but there's a wide range of watercraft out here. And we tend to fish from an anchored position more, whereas England and UK, it's different, isn't it, Rhys? How are things different there?
Yeah, exactly. So, like in the UK, for example, most people don't own boats. If you're
Yeah.
going to fish a large reservoir, they'll have boats on site for you, which you'll hire for the day as part of your ticket price, and then you'll go out. Now, in terms of anchoring in about 90% of lakes isn't very popular. We tend to prefer drifting and covering a lot of water.
Mhm.
The only probably lake where it's more prevalent is one of the prominent lakes, Rutland.
Mhm.
But even then, it's not the go-to. Most people prefer to drift, but there are a population of anglers who would prefer to anchor. That's largely because, and this goes back to a little bit what we discussed before, anchoring can help buzzer fishing incredibly, especially if you're on a bed. And
Yep.
that is where probably the only anchoring happens in the UK is when the buzzer season is in full swing in the smaller bays, boats will anchor up. But generally, most of us will prefer drifting all day. We drift water, we cover water, and that's kind of the general rule that we take.
Yeah, that's similar. We do a lot of buzzer chironomid fishing here, particularly in the west at this time of the year. Although not for me, my lakes are still frozen. We had snow yesterday still, so winter's still hanging on here. So it might take a little while for me to get my challenge on captured on video. But we anchor a lot. It's very dominant here. But you do a lot more competitions, I think, than we do over here, and that's the preferred method of when you're fishing competitions. So naturally, you'd want to continue to use that method in practice, right, to perfect your skills.
Yeah. So to be fair, I'm not sure. I think with competitions, I don't think you can anchor. But out of interest, so for example, if you prefer to anchor, obviously it keeps you on the bed for longer. It should increase your chances of fish. But if you were to compare drifting over the same piece of water 5 or 6 times in comparison to anchoring for that hour and a half, what for you is what's the difference in fish catches? If you were to say, if you were to ratio it out, where would you think roughly? I know this is a loose estimate. Where would you say? How much more effective is it?
That's hard to say because we just, typically once people start anchoring up, it's tough to drift through. The two methods usually don't play well together. Your anchored fishermen don't appreciate people drifting through their water, and the drifting anglers don't appreciate somebody anchoring right in the middle of their drift and spoiling it. But when we're chironomid fishing, which is dominant, hugely dominant out here in the West, we have some incredible chironomid hatches, and it's very good. We catch a lot of fish doing it that way. So it's hard to say. There's more and more. It's myself. I enjoy lock styling a lot. I do it more and more each year. We tend to do it more on deeper water where it's not practical to anchor. Some of the waters I've done some schools on in Eastern Canada where the water could be 60, 80 feet deep on a rocky bottom that the anchor's not going to hold terribly well anyway. It's just going to slide if there's any kind of wind. We lock style, and those fish typically are up in the upper part of the water column or along the edges anyway, because that's where the food is and that's where they like to go. They're not going to, I don't know about your lake, but most of our rainbows, for example, don't like to go down very, very deep, 80, 90 feet kind of thing. They stay up shallow, usually less than 20 feet down, but they will suspend over and feed on zooplankton, daphne, like you've got there. So yeah. Okay, so why don't we start going through some of the flies? I've got one of yours up here. Do you want to alternate them or just go through yours? It doesn't matter to me.
I don't mind. I completely don't mind.
Okay, well, let's just go through yours, and you can. What I'd like you to do is give me your tips on how to fish these. A little description and things like that, and we'll see what questions that generates, and we'll have some fun with this. So here we go. We're going to add this one here, and I'm just going to pull that out and just make it there. There we go. Can everybody see that?
So that is the Ecstasy Worm. So you've heard of Ecstasy. You have Ecstasy in America, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Is it similar to slip? It looks similar to slush jelly too.
Yeah, so obviously Ecstasy came first.
Mhm.
F&F slush jelly came after. They're,
Okay.
they're very similar. I think the only difference is there's some extra fibers in slush jelly, which are they offer a bit more glimmer. But basically,
Uh-huh.
this is an ecstasy worm. So when ecstasy first came, we all fished ecstasy eggs. That became the norm. And then anglers began to experiment with different types of ways of using ecstasy. So this is what we call an ecstasy worm. You can fish this. It's primarily a small stillwater winter pattern. This pattern you're going to fish when you're fishing over fresh fish when there's not much natural food available. So this can come in hundreds of different colors, obviously, as you know with ecstasy. And it is a case of just trial and error in terms of colors. In terms of how you'd fish this, there's two common ways at the moment. Under a sight indicator, in the same way that you would fish a blob, or there's one angler who is doing really, really well on this up in Scotland, and he's basically fishing two of them on about a 10, 12, 15-foot leader on a floating line, and all he's doing is fishing it like buzzers. So this fly has a very enticing movement in the tail, which when you fish it slow enough, not too fast, it works really well basically in terms of the tail. So if you were not going to fish it under the sight indicator, the other option is to fish it what we call straight lined, as you know, on a floating line with two of them spaced evenly apart. And all you're doing is just very, very slow figure of eight. And what tends to happen is the line just shoots away and the fish has taken it. And what's effectively happening with a fly, and you won't see this um, when the fly's out there, the tail is just doing this meandering movement, which is just enough to pique a trout's interest.
Well, that's pretty cool. That also just the attractive colors. We use a lot of those, blob style flies for, particularly when they're on zooplankton. It's one of my favorite flies to. It suspends really well under an indicator, so it's I'm just leaning off here to put the next fly in. Um, but we use a lot of those bright colors. I'm excited. I think that one. I should be able to have some good fun with that one. And what other colors are you tying it in?
Oh, the color, your choice is your oyster. You could
Yeah,
have orange, lime, biscuit, cheese, white,
yeah,
black. They all work. It's one of those patterns where the pattern will work in early
yeah.
seasons. So obviously, you're coming
Okay.
out now of snow. So
Yeah,
if we had snow here, we had a
yeah,
really cold frost.
yeah.
We fish that pattern at that time of year. So
Okay.
January to March is when it's the coldest. We fish that pattern, and if the pattern will work, it's just a case of if that color doesn't work, then you change the color.
So if you had three colors, what would you bring? That pink one?
Pink, orange, and probably yellow.
Okay, orange. And what kind of orange? A sunburst or that
Uh,
safety orange?
like more safety orange.
Okay, really. Okay, I'm making notes here because I think this one's going to have a place in my box. Okay, the next one up, and I'll just make it. This looks interesting.
It looks horrendous. Let's be honest.
Yes.
It looks absolutely horrendous. But again, it's a winter fly that works really well here. It's basically a chamois, so a
Yeah.
chamois cloth.
Yeah.
This particular one has been dyed claret red, um, but you can get them in different colors. You can get them in yellow. Natural is probably the most prolific one, but this one's in red. And similarly, again, this is an out and out sight indicator fly for early season.
Okay.
So when you're fishing on a pressured water, which may have seen blobs and slush jelly, like you mentioned, and stuff like that, it doesn't mean that the sight indicator method isn't going to work. We just need to try something different under it.
Mhm.
And so these styles of flies sometimes can be the winning ticket in that sense. And again, really simple way of fishing it. It is just a sight indicator. Set it at the depth where you think the fish are at, and just hold on. What tends to happen if you go for the original chamois? Chamois has a natural oil in it, and some of us think that actually is what the driving factor is. about why the fly is so successful. But we've dyed different colors, pinks, yellows, reds, like this, and they work as well. So once you dye it, you lose the natural oil that comes out of the chamois itself. Um, but yeah, so that's it basically. Very
Okay.
simple. Not
Are
complicated.
you buying the chamois in a big, larger size and just cutting it in strips?
I buy from the supermarket, so I don't think there's not a very difference between a lot of the brands that
Yeah.
sell in conventional stores. So we just buy it and then cut it then into like probably I'd say probably a 3.5, 4 inch strip,
Yeah.
and then
Okay.
yeah.
Do you ever strip it?
No, it's not something that I've ever done.
Okay.
It's always been a conventional. Put it under a siding gate and leave it there. But have you stripped these?
No, I've never. I've used a sham. I remember being down. I talked to you earlier. I was down in Arizona a number of years ago, and they used a fly pattern called a dog bone or wishbone or something. And it was basically chamois cut like a little dog treat bone, figure eighted onto the hook. And I have to admit, when I first looked at it, I kind of looked puzzled and wondered. But they stripped that, and it moved and wiggled because chamois gets really mobile when it gets wet, and
Yeah.
they seem to do well on it. So, but I'm excited to look like that. Is that a tungsten bead in the middle of that, or just brass?
No, it's brass.
Okay. And there's a question here while we've got it on: is it important to be that long?
Generally, I've seen a version of this fly fished very, very short, and I'm talking it was a size 16 with a 1 inch chamois just coming off the back like a tail. So that has worked. So is it important it's that long? I don't think so.
Okay.
It's a case of see what works for you. You might find the longer version works or a shorter version works. Shorter version works. The problem you've got is with the chamois, like other things, the longer it gets, the more likely it is to foul or tangle around the hook end.
Okay. All right. Let's talk about the next one here. This was the fly you introduced to me last year. You said you got to give this thing a whirl, and you advised me to fish it in, I think, 3 to 4 inch strips. And I was using it back in Eastern Canada, and wow, one was working so well. I put 2 on and got, I think, 2 double hookups in a row fishing, because you can fish multiple flies. So, and this fly has become one of my favorite sort of attractor flies, just because of the way I fish it aggressively. I tend to pigeonhole those flies into that. So, tell us a little bit about this fly.
So this is the Ecstasy Worm. It was created by a very talented competition angler by the name of Peter Appleby, who is based up in Northern England. So this was a fly that he created, and I think it's revolutionized a lot of the stillwater fishing that we do, particularly on the small stillwaters. So this is called a red apps, and it's not complicated. He's built a very simple but a really effective fly, and what this is supposed to represent, the logic is that it could represent a bloodworm, but obviously you look at it, it doesn't represent a bloodworm. It's more of an attractor style of fly that fish just can't say no to, quite simply. There's lots of different ways of fishing it. You can fish it static, you can fish it slow, you can fish it fast. You can mix it up depending on what day it is, and you can change the colors as well. But this kind of red version is what is arguably probably the most successful original pattern, or close to as you can get. And it's in the UK. Everybody knows about this fly now. About, I would say, probably 10 years ago, it wasn't so commonly known, but now everybody knows about it, and it does catch a serious amount of fish on small still waters.
It does. The one I tied, I just used Glow Bright floss in red for mine, and I was using Stretch Floss, Super Floss, Spanflex. We have a lot of. It's all the same stuff. I'm not sure. What name is the material you're tying it out of?
So that one tied with. Actually, we have a fly fair here in the UK once a year, and that is a bargain bucket. Oxyfloss that I found unbranded.
Yeah.
Just I saw it. I was like, that's the color I want.
Yeah.
I'll buy it. And I bought about 10 packs of it. So,
yeah, and you've got a couple of excellent videos on your channel, both how to tie this and how to fish it. And I think what were your three favorite colors? You had this, amber, and olive.
That's right. Yeah. So this color is by far the most successful. It works everywhere. And then when you go into then yellow works really well for fresh fish.
Yeah.
And then olive works really well then for older fish, for example.
Well, I'm just putting the other one because you sent me two of these, thankfully. Yeah. And this was one of my challenges when you said, okay, send me some flies. I'm like, well, I'm not going to send you boobies because you've got enough boobies over there. Fabs, which I love. Well, you've already got those. Blobs, you know about those. And now you've got me all fired up on these apps worms. So I knew I wasn't sending you those. So it got a little harder at times to go, okay, now what am I sending them? So anyway, but here's the other one. I'll just add this to the stream and bring it out. This is the amber one. And this is tied a little differently, isn't it?
Yeah, so you can see the difference between this one is it's got four legs in the center.
Yeah.
So, as you can imagine, this has a lot more it has the potential to have a lot more movement in it, depending on how you retrieve it. And that's why the movement together with the color, this is a better version for fresher fish, in my experience. Obviously, everyone's different. Peter might say differently based on what his years of experience with this fly are.
Yeah.
I'm just telling you about what I've found myself. So, so you can tie them in varying versions. You've got a 4-legger, a 6-legger, 8-legger. Anything over 8 legs, I would say, is a bit too much. But who knows? There could be a 12-legger out there that is the killer fly.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite? Do you just play with them? Some days they like just the 4-legger. Some days this one's got 2, 4, 6, 8 legs.
Yeah, exactly. For example, if we go into a fishery which we know has been recently stocked, I might fish the yellow one on the top as an attractor. If there are fresh fish there, they will come to it. Mm-hmm. And then I might have the more subtle red one trailing behind just to pick up those fish that might be pulled in by the yellow one. Might think, oh, no, that's too garish. And then see the red one and go, yeah, I'll have that instead,
Yeah. Now by fresh fish, you're talking about what we would call freshly stocked fish, right? And there's a couple of questions here. One I had from a friend of mine. I'm trying to find. I'll turn the page over because I'm writing notes feverishly here. What you're telling me to fish these, and it was about the difference of charging. Eric Messenger, who asked me, do you fish different flies for lakes that are mostly planted trout? And is there a difference in feeding from recently planted trout? Over here, I tend to fish, we tend to fish the same way. And if we get a fresh stocky, we do. But we certainly find flies like the Apps worm, the blobs, the boobies, the brighter flies tend to get more of your stock fish because they're just learning how to fish again. As one of the analogies, they're like a 2-year-old. Everything's in their mouth. They're trying to figure it out. And you guys call it stocky bashing, don't you, over there, where they're suckers for this kind of stuff.
Yeah, so exactly. So, for example, let's take a conventional day on one of the big reservoirs in the UK. If most big reservoirs in the UK will stock once a week, and they'll stock over 1,000 fish, generally the bigger ones.
Yeah.
So, if you compare that, we would fish your fabs, your boobies. We won't fish a washing line, but there'll be a bright fly on there somewhere just to pick up those fresher fish that are in the lake, or we might go on pulling methods, which is pulling blobs on heavy sinking lines. That is the kind of conventional approach, depending on where the fish are in the water, but that is conventional approaches in the UK for freshly stocked fish. Mm-hmm. If we would take a lake now, for example, let's throw that on its head and go to a lake that has had fish stocked, but maybe it stocks twice a year. The approach there would be not too dissimilar to start. You'd probably fish if it's middle of spring or summer, mm-hmm. You'd fish a washing line with 2 nymphs, so something subtle to trap the older fish. You might start with a bright fab on the point just to see if there's anything about. But if you haven't had a fish in the first hour or two, right, take the bright fab off and put a really subtle cruncher black booby on, or something that looks quite natural in its approach, or a big dry fly or something like that. And that is how you would approach it differently. So I think we're not too far away from each other in terms of how we think about it, how we approach it. But yeah.
Yeah, we always, because I've got my Canadian American viewers know I'm very good friends with Brian Chan, who's a retired fisheries biologist. And one thing Brian told me all the time, that fish hang around in age class. They're like school kids, right? They won't. I always joke that grade 6s won't play with the grade 7s and until puberty kicks in, then everybody's playing with everybody. But and that's, you've got that fresh class of fish that are stocked in. They're aggressive. They're dumb as sticks. And of course, after they get culled out, end up on the dinner plate or whatever, or ospreys get them or whatever. And then those grown on fish, as you call them, are fish that have lived a few years, or there's not as many of them around, so they're not as competitive with each other. And I don't know if they're any smarter, but they're just probably a little more scared than every other fish in the lake. So they're a little harder to catch. So that's cool. It's cool.
And I think as well, with where we are in the UK, stillwater fishing is so prominent, so popular in all the disciplines of fishing, that the older fish, they don't really get much of a chance to rest. Like if you look at the prominent big lakes that everybody goes to, there's certain arms of a lake. Like, so for example, in Rutland, you've got a place called Manton, which is never a place where you go after stockfish. You go to catch your fish of the weekend there, which will be a really 3-4 pound grown on fish with a full tail, great markings on it. But again, there are people doing that every day, almost every week. So because of that, those fish are few and far between as time goes on,
Yeah. Just a question, just to finish up the Apps worm, best fly lines. You mentioned hanging it under an indicator. When I was fishing it in Eastern Canada, I was fishing it on a sweep line because we were out over deeper water drifting. And that seemed to work. I could pull the flies through different depths. And those of you not familiar with a sweep line, it's a line that has airflow makes them. I know Rio's got them now. I'm not sure if SA does, but or a version of them. But basically, there's 3 differing sink rates along the line, and Rio's makes them so I use a lot of their lines in a fast and a slow formula. It's basically an 1.5 inch tip on the slow, a 4 inch per second midsection, and a 3 inch, I think, on the back end. So just to encourage that sweep through the water so you can search. But I was fishing it on a clear intermediate in British Columbia because there was a question asking if fish in British Columbia. It was the question was from Guitar Kirk, Apps worms in there. How do you find them here in BC, British Columbia, whether they fish Penasks, Frasers, or Blackwaters? That's the strains of rainbows they stock in there, Rhys. The Penasks are your typical Kamloops rainbow trout, very, very little spots, beautiful silver fish, very acrobatic, total insect eaters, won't eat other fish, but aggressive, particularly the triploids. Fraser Valleys are a true stock fish. They used to, generally they grow fast, and they use them a lot of times if there's been some kind of winter kill or natural event like that, to kill them to get the lake back up to speed quickly. They grow like mad. And then the Blackwaters were another aggressive strain they put in to compete. They live in they come out of the Blackwater River in British Columbia, where they live with other fish, other species, and are competitive. And if other small fish get in there, they'll compete and eat them from time to time. But my experience, all 3 of them will eat it. And I've got them on trout in Eastern Canada, in Alberta, where I live. They're all, all these different strains are put in. But
I think, on the point of what line is best, I think it depends very much on where are the fish in the water on that day. That's what it is more. It's not there's one line you'll always go to. It's if the fish are in the top 3 foot of water, then what line would you normally go to when in the top 3 foot? If they're 15 foot down, you go to the line that you would fish when they're 15 foot down. That whole principle.
Yeah, the same way. You pick the line or the method that'll put the fly where the fish are. Okay, let's look at the next one here. I recognize this as a variation of a cormorant, which is another favorite fly of mine.
Yeah, exactly that. So it's a black cormorant. It's a slight variation on Kieran Jenkins' cormorant. I just removed the hackle, but I think the fly's been around for years in the UK. Cormorants are quite an interesting fly in concept. For me personally, they were a bogey fly for many years, and then did some small tweaks and then got used to them. But for a lot of UK anglers, some people swear by them, some people can't catch a fish on them. And I think with in terms of how you'd fish a pattern like this in the UK, there's three different ways. Yeah, you'd say you'd either be pulling it on a heavy sinking line, so like a dive 3 or a dive 5, as part of a sandwich between two blobs. So going back to that idea of if you're stocky bashing in the morning, you're going to catch the fish on the blobs, but by the afternoon, those fish might switch off the blobs a little bit. So if you've got two cormorants in between the two blobs in the afternoon, you'll see your chances, your increased catch rate not come from the blobs, but come from the two cormorants in between. And it's important that you keep the blobs on because the blobs work as an attractor to pull the fish in. The fish will come to the blob, say, "Oh, I don't want that because I've seen it all morning." Turn around, "Oh, there's a nice little cormorant there. I'll eat that."
Yeah. Yeah, no, they to me it looks, it just looks good to eat. It can, when that marabou wing gets wet, it slims right down. Could be resemble a buzzer or a chironomid. It could look a little bait fish. It just looks good to eat, and I'm a big believer of that too. Is to have those blobs or fabs, if you're fishing a team of flies, to attract fish in, to pull them in, and they may not eat the attractor, but they'll certainly have a go at something more natural. So that I'm looking forward to fishing that one, and that's just a little bit of glister dubbing, I imagine, or something like that, or ice dub.
Yeah, it's hens. I think it's hens 23, or it's definitely it's a hens glister dubbing.
Yeah, kind of a peacock greeny color. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you vary the body colors at all?
Yeah, so we'll do peacock pearl with a pearl rib, red rib, blue rib. You can cormorants. You can come up with loads of different variations.
Red and black popular, or holographic red?
Yes.
And okay.
Yeah, very very popular. Pearl is very common. I think it's consistently works because it could represent pin fry, for example, on a large reservoir. But yeah, you can vary them differently. There's white, there's black, there's sunburst cormorants as well. So it's just about mixing it. Black by far is the most prominent color in the UK fishing side of things.
All right, this one here, I'm just getting in the vise. That's why I'm leaning in and out all the time, and I forgot to put Rhys back in there. But I love. Well, you're Welsh. Dialback, right? Dialback means little devil.
Yeah, Dialback.
Yeah, I just love these things. So when I saw these in your present, your package, I was quite excited. But I tie a lot of mine with the traditional way: peacock curl, a little pearl rib or a pearl back on it. I do well with those colors as a suggestive buzzer pattern or a chironomid pattern. And when they get on scuds or freshwater shrimp, it's been a bit of a confidence fly because it's reminiscent of a swimming shrimp as well, a swimming scud. But this one's tied a little differently. What did you? This obviously black hackle, black beard hackle. But what's the body of?
The body on that is peacock curl. I've used a bit of brown glister on the front, just a little bit, just a tiny little bit.
Yeah.
And, the outbacks, they are the bread and butter of nymph fishing like us. Like they catch so many fish from probably in the UK now onwards. So we're now getting into that warmer phase of the year where fish are probably will start to position up in about the top 5 to 6 foot of water on average on a daily basis. Unless the weather really hits it or we have a cold front, they will be in the top 6 foot of water. So this is where a washing line with a fabber will be on the points, 2 or 3 of the owls on the droppers, and then either a floating line or a midship really comes to the fore in most fisheries for the next 2 or 3 months, basically.
Yeah, no, just an excellent fly. I can't say enough good things about that. I was so happy to see some of those. I'll give those a good bash. And we've got another one here as well. That's another variation of the same fly, but a little smaller and a little bit of a hot spot on it. What's different about this one, Rhys?
So this is more of a stocky, more of a stocky bashing nymph. So I say that because if there are, for example, fresher fish in the lake, so if a fish is fresh as and it gets introduced on a Monday in the lake, if there's enough food source around, that fish will switch on to natural food very, very, very quickly. Like within 2 days, you might be wasting your time trying to catch a big population of fresh fish on lures. What you're better off doing is switching to the nymphs, but small minor adjustments. So, like for example, with this, the beauty of this fly is that it has that bright red head. It has that pseudo nymph hackle. It has the red holographic. Red holographic is really prominent in the albachs for obvious reasons, but largely this would be a top dropper fly I would fish to pull the fish in again. So we're not talking about trying to, instead of pulling fish in with a blob, you can pull fish in with nymphs by fishing a bright red head for one, and then the one we previously showed, you could have this trailing behind it, and then perfect. You either have the fish come up, take that red head yowl, or it might come up and say, "Oh, it's too bright," turn around, and then it sees the more subtle drab yowl behind it.
Yeah, no, it's this is a sweet looking little fly, because that's again the peacock curl with what looks to be a red holographic mylar ribbon there, and
So that's not peacock curl. That's pseudo. Do you have pseudo over there?
Pseudo
hackle. So it's basically it's
like the stuff they use in wedding dresses.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, I've just gone blank on the material, but yeah, we'll have what's an alternative if we don't have, I'm sure we have it. It's probably like most fly time materials. It's one material's got 37 names. So
yeah, it's called pseudo, PSUDO.
Yeah.
And people have started to use it a lot more now.
Yeah.
It's not as obviously it's not an exact copy of what peacock curl is, because peacock curl has that coppery tint to it, the natural sheen to it. It doesn't have that. But what people have found is that on some days pseudo will work just as well, and there's no risk of the fly being ripped apart. That's the beauty of pseudo, is that it won't, if a fish takes it, you're fine, you know. So,
yeah, bulletproof almost.
There we go. Someone just put it in there. Organza. That's the one.
Organza. There we go. All right, now we're getting into something I think a lot of Western anglers, a lot of anglers in North America are going to like, and it's the buzzers, chironomids. So let me just make this large, and this is beautiful looking. This is going to get eaten, I'm pretty sure.
It's not. That's the thing with buzzers.
Yeah.
The tying of them isn't difficult. It's very simple. Thread. I think that's an olive rib, and then some tulip pink cheeks was on that one, and that's kind of like buzzer. My buzzers are very, very simple personally, and I think a lot of anglers who fish in the UK, they don't overdress their buzzers. They keep it very simple. Maybe have a little tag in there just to draw the fish in as well, but otherwise, sometimes a buzzer like this, or like a Curly's buzzer, will outfish most other buzzers.
Yeah. So, what are you using for the wing pads again?
That's orange tulip paint.
Oh, okay. So really, really simple. Now, one thing I noticed the difference, and I'll get this, we can talk, is that not a lot of beadhead buzzer patterns over your way. We do a lot, and you saw a couple in there. Is that because of the competition and not being allowed to fish them, or just not popular? I often get asked this question. I don't have an answer for it. A good answer.
Just not popular.
Yeah.
It's not, obviously, in competition, under FIPS, you can fish one bead.
Yeah.
I think in normal loch style fishing, you can't fish a bead. I don't think it's allowed, but that isn't the reason why people don't fish beaded nymphs. They just generally, if we're fishing buzzers, there's very few occasions where we are fishing buzzers in 15 feet or below. It's always in the top 15 feet.
Okay.
So fishing 3 buzzers on a 25-foot leader or something like that, resin buzzers or varnish buzzers like those, that does it for the UK. Because the thing is as well, it is a popularity thing. That's all it is. There's nothing else to it. But if you're fishing, when you fish those beaded buzzers, do you fish 3 beaded buzzers or just one?
It depends. The province of British Columbia to my west is single fly only. And there was a question from one of our followers here about tips for fishing just single fly. I've lived in British Columbia for 35, 36 years. But once I moved, I've been in Alberta now for 18 odd years, and I like fishing droppers. There's so many tactical advantages. Arguably the last thing you want is two fish on at once. It's fun when it happens from time to time, but my experience, if they're two good fish, it's usually a loss of tippet leader flies and shaky nerves.
Yeah.
Right? Or you land one of them, but you can't get the second one in. We fish a lot of chironomids under indicators, so on a lot of beadhead patterns. We do fish them deeper too. We will fish them in 20, 25, 30, 40 feet. We do have lakes that they will emerge out the beds of the the muddy bottom beds that the larvae, the bloodworm, like to inhabit, can be down that deep. We fish those with fast anchored, fast sinking, like a type 7 DI7 line, short leader, straight down, hang it a foot off the bottom. We call it dangling. We let it hang there for as long as we can tolerate it, and then start that slow, painstakingly slow hand twist retrieve up. And I'll tell you, Rhys, when you come out here, you can do anything you want. You can fish that into the teeth of the meanest wind. You can look at each other. You guys can have a conversation like we're having now. Just don't let go of the rod, because the takes are absolutely crushing. I had a friend of mine, she had a rod pulled right out of the boat like that, gone, because the takes are just heart-stopping.
So run me through it, right? Because we don't fish like this at all.
Yeah.
We always fish top 15 foot of water.
Yeah.
Is wet because that's just naturally for us.
Most of the times we are. Yeah.
So when you're in a position where the fish are stationary at about 30, 40 feet, and because they're feeding on a lake, a buzzer hatch just coming up off from a lake bed, you will fish a die 7 with how long a leader?
For me, it's usually about 5 feet, two sections of like maybe 1X tippet and 3X, or 2X and 3X knotted together. I make a section because the takes are so hard. If something breaks off, I want it to break off, separate the leader. That's kind of the weak link in the system. And we'll fish 2 feet. And because we're fishing them vertically, so we're anchored and fishing straight down below our rod tip. And, we'll have those, typically it's going to happen. Usually we do this method over 20 feet. Sometimes I've done it shallower, about 14. It's just water visibility. The murkier the water, the shallower you can get away with it. But most times we're fishing deeper water. So after spring, after the lake is turned over and mixed, and the fish are going to be out there early summer, because we will have some emergencies that are happening, June, July, even into August sometimes, where they're coming up out of 30, 40, 50, 60 feet. And the fish will be there, feeding on them at some point along their ascent to the surface.
So would you then, for example,
yeah.
I got a few questions about this.
Yes.
Question number 1: how do you prevent the fly from hitting the lake bed? Or not, because it's so deep?
Well, what we do is we actually have little weights that we, like a pair of hemostats, but because in Canada I don't, but others ice fish, not because ice fishing's bad. It's just, I'm usually speaking, it's too darn cold. We clip these weights on to the fly, and we'll lower that over the side of the boat. So that's going to pull down, right down, and hit the bottom. And then we'll set the rod up how we're going to fish it. Maybe the rod tips this high off the water, and we'll just start reeling the line in. Just keep reeling. And eventually that rod tip is going to pull down when that weight is just pulled off the bottom. It's kind of just hanging there. And then I'll reach up in front of my retrieve hand about another foot, pull that line in, reel it in, strip the remaining line and take the line off. So I know when I cast, I've only got enough line and leader so it'll hang a foot off the bottom. Does that make sense?
Just so I get this right, so there was a weight attached.
Yeah, the weight is used to find the bottom, right? So I again, that line, the weight hits the bottom and just sits there. And the rod tip's going to be sitting there kind of like this. And then I'm going to start reeling the line in, and all of a sudden that rod tip's going to go like that. That tells me that weight is just kissing the bottom. So I'm going to pull in an extra foot of line and reel that in. And then I'm going to strip the remainder of the line that's out with the weight on it, take the weight off, flop that out there, literally, cast it, and then just let it sit and let it sink till it's straight down vertical. It's a lot of fun. And the takes are aggressive. If somebody can't cast very well, it's perfect for them. When I do chironomid clinics over here, I always have to jokingly show that method last because nobody's going to fish long leader nymphing or under indicators or bungs or anything. They just want to fish the dangle because the take is just heart stopping. It's just, okay, that's a fish. And just a question, a Dutch fly fisher. I saw your questions earlier. We'll get to them. Yes, Maligne Lake is a beautiful lake located right on the BC-Alberta border. And yes, you would definitely want to dangle there. It's an excellent place to dangle. Some great brook trout and rainbow trout fishing there. It's one of my favorite ways to do it. So yeah, hopefully that made sense, Rhys. If not, I can send you diagrams. Give it a bash. If you typically in those scenarios, we're going to see, if we've got a sounder on board, we're going to mark fish, or we're going to see the shucks on the surface or birds on the surface over deep water. Or if it's a bright sunny day and they just don't want to go into the shallows, they'll stay out there and fish deep. Because it was a great question here. It's probably a good time to bring it in. It's been up here. Here from UK, trout seldom feed on the bottom, mostly in the upper water column. Even in the States, several high-profile anglers that trout only feed in the upper 4 or 5 feet of water. As seems interesting to me, as I often have 30 to 50 fish days fishing chironomids a foot off the bottom in 18 to 20 feet of water. I don't always. I believe fish will feed where they want to feed. So some days they'll fish 4 or 5 feet down, and other days they're a foot off the bottom. Most of our productive lakes, that's where our best fishing is to target that, because that's where all the food is. They're going to go down there. It's safe, lots of food, no birds to get them. We have a lot of eagles, loons, ospreys, things like that if they venture up to the surface, they're going to pay a heavy price for it. So what about your waters? You do fish shallower, and they will come up and follow the buzzers as they emerge up through the surface.
We don't. So on Brian's question there, we don't, I can think of one instance, and I'm talking about 10 years ago, where at one of the big reservoirs, the fish were sitting deep in the middle of summer. Yeah. So the conventional method there by the top anglers was to fish a Rio midge tip, 4 buzzers on about a 28-foot leader, something very, very long. And there was no wind, so it was flat calm. So you chucked it out, and you just waited, and they would wait 3-4 minutes, maybe even longer. They would barely move the flies, just trying to keep them down there. So it's interesting, Brian, in terms of your question. Most of the time in the UK, we fish top 15 foot of water. Yeah, and generally, if you were to assess on a competition who catches the most fish, you will find that most anglers fishing in the top 15 foot of water, depending on every day is different, will bring in the results. There are very few instances where we have to fish 30, 40, 50 foot of water. Yeah. There was one occasion last year, one of the prominent Welsh stillwater large reservoirs, where the fishing just died for like a week, and everyone was like, well, what's going on? Where have these fish disappeared to? There's no fish in the lake, and so on and so forth. And then very quickly, a small group of anglers worked out that they fished a die 7, single booby, and a really small booby, like a size 14 with small eyes, and they chucked it out, and they just left it, just to get it down to where the fish were. And the fish were about 30 foot, I think it was. So they were either fishing a small booby, or they fished two humonguses on quite a relatively short leader, chucked it out on a booby basher, an airflow booby basher, which is it's a die 8 with a die 7 running line, I think it is, and then count to 2 minutes or 1.5 minutes, and then start the retrieve. And as you were starting the retrieve up, fish. Yeah, but no, I don't think, to be honest with you, nobody in the UK, and obviously you've mentioned there about the using of a weight. Yeah. Nobody in the UK would say, "Oh, I'll go and fish 2 buzzers on a die 7." Yeah, we wouldn't do it, and I think not vertically like we are here. Yeah, no, because I think as well, because we do so much drifting. Yeah. We can't judge, right? Are we going to get? Are we going to be stuck? Are we not going to be stuck? Yeah, you can't do that method drifting. It's a plant yourself, so you have total control, because you're basically, you're the way you're just bringing those chironomids, buzzers up vertically, just like the naturals. So. Yeah. All right, let's. Don't want to keep you here all day because we still got to go through my flies yet. You might have to get another ale. Okay.
Not a problem. Okay, this one. Oh, no, we've already showed that. Is that the
We
same? No,
skip
that's.
that one.
Oh,
We can skip that one. It's very similar to the
yeah.
last.
Okay. Yeah. And then we've got just this one here with a little bit of. Ignore my big little. This is more the one with a little bit of an attractor to it. Little tractor hotspot.
Yeah, so this is more commonly what you'll see on most UK buzzers. Most UK buzzers will have a spot either at the back end or behind the thorax, a rib, and then cheeks either made of Spanflex or Glow Bright.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is a conventional UK buzzer.
I,
Work really well.
yeah, it looks, black is, you can't go wrong with black and silver, black and red.
No,
You are a lot of our, and you'll see on the chronomids I supplied to you, we fish a lot of curved scud patterns or 2 extra long nymph hook patterns, a lot of curved patterns. Are they not used there, not popular?
no, not as popular. So when you're what we found, the general consensus is that when you're straight lining buzzers, if you fish a curved buzzer, because of like a Kamasan B110, for example, it's going to spin. If it's fishing on a sight indicator, it'll be fine. It needs to. But if you're fishing straight lining, it's more prone to spinning. So we fish straight line buzzers because they don't spin nowhere near as much.
Excellent.
That's the logic.
Oh, it makes that's great. There's a question here of you, Rhys, about the cat's whisker while I get the other flies going.
Yeah. So Susan's asked, I started tying the cat's whisker here and it's been a great fly for northern BC. Is this still a popular fly over there? Yep, 100%. Catches a lot of fresh fish on smaller still waters. So we've got in the UK a good prominence of really small still waters. So we're talking 1 to 10 acres big. Mm-hmm. And the cat's whisker is very much a go-to fly for fish that have been recently stocked in those types of smaller lakes.
And for people who aren't familiar with the cat's whisker, that's white marabou tail, bright green body, and a white marabou wing. Both tied as what you call a lure. We probably call it a streamer, and in booby form as well, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So, and we'll get to some of these other questions as much as we can. I'm trying to pick off the other questions. We have, well, one question we had, and I think it was from Devin. I can't remember if we answered it or not, but he's noticed, obviously, with that chamois, I'll call it the chamois worm, hopefully, and the apps worm, any issues with them tangling and wrapping around the shank? Any tips on trying to prevent that?
Length is important. Yeah. I think on the apps, for example, Peter's done a video on it on YouTube, and he says his guidance was either 1 inch or 1.5 inches either side of the hook shank. So take a ruler, work it out, or you can use a matchstick like most of us do. Yeah. But eventually, after X amount of fish or X amount of time in the water, the flexi-floss will weaken and it will get tangled. At that point, scrap the fly, throw it out. Don't keep using it. There's no way that what's happened is that the material has become so limp that it can't recover itself. So you're better off throwing that away and tying up a new one. That's the simplest answer for that.
Or giving it to a friend, right?
Yeah. You're with them when you've got 20 fish.
Don't know why. It's the same fly as mine. Don't know why it's doing that. A question here, just quickly again from Dutch Fly Fisher. What I use the non-slip loop knot and knot here. I know it's not a knot legal for competitions. What is your favorite knot for tying flies on?
So non-slip, does that mean the Rapala knot? Is that right?
Yeah.
My preferred knot is a double Davy. Okay. I used to a blood knot, but then I just found that when I switched to my river fishing, a double Davy has a much more smaller knot and much more the knot. So I just fish double Davy. I fish double Davy for the flies. I fish a double Davy for the line to leader connection. Never failed me unless I've done something myself wrong with a knot. So can't complain.
Another question from Brian here. Rhys, if fishing the washing line only using 2 flies because of state fishing regulations, what would your leader setup be?
So if I'm fishing 2 flies, I would generally go 7 and 7. It's just 2 flies, Fab or Booby on the point, and then I prefer Dialbach for washing line.
Yeah.
Because of, so my logic is with Dialbachs and nymphs is that if I'm fishing in the top 3 foot of water, I won't really fish a buzzer. I'll tend to fish a Dialbach or a pheasant tail or something like that. If I have to fish deeper than 3 foot of water, then maybe I'll switch to buzzers at that point. But 7-7, we fish straight through leaders here. We don't fish tapered leaders. So if it's on a large reservoir, it'll be about 6 or 7 pound. And yeah, and then just kind of the flies that you've seen the show today, in essence, is what I'd fish.
Okay. All right. Well, let's 55. I think we're going to be a little longer than an hour, but not too much longer. So let's bring this one in. Now we're talking about my donations to the cause here. This is, again, not having fished but following your stuff as close as I can. This is just a simple bloodworm pattern. Originally called the frostbite bloodworm. It's got the little stretch floss legs that are more representative of the little pro legs out the back. It's more of an imitative pattern. It was originally tied with a material called frostbite. It's hard to find. It was on a spool. You had to unravel it. It was like woven buzzer wrap, but this is tied with buzzer wrap and just a wire rib, red, gold, and we would fish it. Your long leader nymphing or on a team of flies, like long leaders, floating line, midge tip kind of thing, and just creepy crawl it very, very slowly. So,
would you fish it as a point fly?
Sometimes, yeah, because it'll run deeper, which is in logic where the chironomid larvae live.
Yeah.
It's been a lot of, when I show people chironomid larva patterns, they're not the most inspiring patterns in the world because there's just not a lot to them.
But it looks like a bloodworm. It looks exactly like a bloodworm.
Good early season. Into the summer months, we do well with bloodworm too, because in our lakes, particularly the shallow ones, the fish, when the shallows get warm and less oxygenated, they're going to slide out into deeper, more oxygenated water and be over a muddy bottom because there's not as much sunlight penetration and weed growth, which is good chironomid beds. And these guys are going to be around. We just find in our lakes that a fish will seldom turn down a chironomid larva. It's just too easy to eat, and there's just so many of them around.
I think this play will work really well over here.
Okay. Thanks. While I get the other one here, I will bring in, I think we've talked about that one. I'll just bring us a little wider here, and I'll get the other fly in the vise here.
Kevin's asked, speaking of knots, how important is the knot you tie when attaching your fly?
Yeah.
Well, if the knot isn't good, you lose the fish, so it's very important. But yeah, to be fair, Double Davy has never failed me since I've started using it, so it is important. I know that a few people use a Rapala knot, obviously, because it offers more movement, particularly with lures. My experience, it hasn't worked for me. I've tried it many times, but just personal confidence is what drives it really, and a Double Davy for me. What about you?
Well, I fish a lot of the non-slip loop knots, but I do fish depending on the, some of the jig flies we fish nowadays that we fish under an indicator or a bung. We'll use a clinch knot or a knot like a Double Davy because when we're using a slotted bead, or there's a newer bead, these teardrop tungsten beads, head turner beads, we can get those flies to hang horizontally just by how the knot we tie them on. They'll suspend, if you just use a regular non-slip loop knot, the fly will hang like this. But if you use a cinch knot, clinch knot, what you guys call a half blood knot, or a Double Davy, or any knot that's tight to the hook eye, and kind of, if the tippet's coming down this way, we'll cinch it just to about the 11 o'clock position, and that'll encourage that fly to hang there like that. After every fish, you might have to reset it a little bit, but it use that a couple times. And sometimes I'm just having a bad day and I can't tie one knot, so I'll tie the other one.
Can I ask a question on that? Yeah. So I'm right now. I've played around a little bit with fishing jig hooks.
Yeah.
For conventional blobs and stuff like that, just to see how it works.
Yeah.
And so, in your experience, have you found that how important is it that the fly sits on the horizontal as opposed to like that, for example?
Yeah. With our leeches, when the balance flies first started appearing in our waters, we were fishing a lot of beadhead leeches, lures, you call them over there. And if you hung those under an indicator, they hang this way, which is not very natural. So we actually did a lot of experimentation. One person would fish one, we'd fish them under a bung about 5 feet apart. And the horizontal one definitely got like 10-1. They seem to prefer it, at least on the couple days we experimented. So I just have a lot of confidence in them. I also like to use them as cast and retrieve flies, particularly lock styling on a breezy day where it's tough to slow down. You need to get your flies down quick. And they pitch, right? Then they're little jigs, and they just undulate in a very seductive way. I've sent you one of my most favorite confidence flies to do that. So they're getting more and more popular. They're great when fish don't want. We have situations where, particularly right after ice off, when the ice leaves, they are, they're in the shallow water because that's where the oxygen is, and they're still not moving very much because that water maybe in Fahrenheit, maybe 38 degrees, 40 degrees, like it's cold, and they're just not moving very much. So that it just sits there and just sort of hangs and almost taunts them into taking them. So we fish a lot of chironomids, buzzer patterns that way. Even though there's none hatching, they seem to know what one is. Fish a lot of small leeches, micro leeches, smaller leeches are popular where they're, the one I sent you is a little bigger, but we fish a lot of the tinier ones, particularly in the fall season. So, yeah.
So what would for example, if you were out now in the fall season, and you were out and you were like, I'm going to fish a sight indicator.
Yeah.
What would prompt you to fish a vampire leech? Is called, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
What would prompt you to fish a vampire leech over a blob?
Usually I fish them both together. To be honest, I will fish the vampire leech, the heavier fly on the bottom, and then the blob off, a dropper up above about 24 inches above, because under the indicator it's going to hang vertically. That's a common, because they will eat we tend to use blobs suspended under indicators to represent zooplankton clusters, Daphnia clusters.
Yeah.
I have experimented a little bit with hanging them horizontally. I only started doing it late last season, so there's not enough out on it. What I found with the blobs, particularly, I don't know if you see it over there, when you hang them under an indicator like that with the stockfish, they can suck them in deep. Right. And we do a lot of catch and release. So I've started fishing them using a tungsten bead, a stiffer, shorter tippet, so they don't have as much time because that slush jelly and stuff, it's a little buoyant. And I think they put it in their mouth. They don't feel any resistance. And because you've lost connection, they'll suck it in. Whereas this is more shorter, tighter connection. The fly is hanging under tension. So if it moves, I can react to it quicker and have less of those deeply hooked fish. Yeah. So that's sort of, a lot of times tend to fish the blobs more mid-depth. Just me, particularly in the late summer, early fall, when the fish have been out in deeper water feeding more on zooplankton. But early spring, they'll be on them too, because they've been out in the deep water over the winter feeding on zooplankton, and they just recognize that color as the food. This is sort of, we'll never probably know for sure, but yeah. All right, so this next fly is a variation of mine. I usually tie this in a beadhead format. It's called a collaborator because it was designed over breakfast one morning, trying to solve a problem. But it's a light thread. This is buzzer wrap as well, the same as the other one. It's got a little red bud on it, and I usually I tie this both with the gold bead on the front of it. And this is sort of the way we tie our chironomid thorax buzzers, with a little peacock curl, pheasant rump or pheasant tail pulled over the top and actually tied off right at the back of the thorax. And then just using yarn, or this is, I think this is unifloss gills that have a fluorescent property to them. So they stand out and pop a little bit, so they'll get seen in murkier water. Although if there's algae in the water, they're going to get the risk of them getting tangled up too. So.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see how your buzzers look compared to ours.
Yeah,
really, really interesting. So I'm sure you're going to cover the other buzzer you sent me as well. But it's just so different,
Yeah.
So different. And they'll work over here,
Yep.
100%. They'll 100% work here.
Yeah.
It's really interesting to see how in Canada that is the staple of a buzzer compared to the black one they showed you. How that differs, but yours.
Yeah, well, we still fish black as our most predominant color, like a black and red. If is sort of a staple in my fly box. We fish a lot of flies with beads, as you've seen, because fishing under indicators is so popular and such a good method. Although we do I love to fish, if I had only one way to fish a lake, it would probably be with a floating line or a midge tip and a long leader and just inching those flies back. I just love that take. I think it's more about that than anything else. Just that it's like a wet fly swing on a river. It just locks up. It gets in your blood. So we fish a lot of that style. That's where the curved hooks comes in to imitate that sort of curved posture. But it was interesting, your comments on the straight shanks. I'll have to give that a whirl. So the next one we're going to put in is a variation of a fly called the Chromie. I designed many years ago. And this is to imitate in the emergence, this thing's getting out of focus a little bit here, but this one here is using, like the original Chromie is tied with silver flashabou for the body, and it's to imitate an inflated pupa. When they get gassed up and they're quite silvery and they're quite active, and wiggling and moving around as they're getting up in the water. This is when we tend to, early in the emergences, we generally fish more of the somber colors because they'll stage above the bottom for days sometimes, and then eventually get gassed up and then start elevating up to the surface and hatching. So we fish a lot of these. This one's tied with a type of flashabou you can't get anymore. You can get the color. The color is the silvery gray color is 6916, but they changed the dye lot on. A lot of anti-static bags are popular material right in Canada in the Northwest. Circuit boards in and cut them into very, very narrow strips, and then use that, and it's to imitate that gas. Part of the natural color comes in, a lot of thread underbodies or gaps in the anti-static to let that sort of bleed through and imitate that sort of gassed up buzzer that's full of the gases they use to elevate up to the surface. So this is what this one is all about here, with a little red holographic. This is sulky thread for the rib because it's on a smaller fly. You could use red holographic mylar. You could use red wire, and then just a black nickel bead with yarn gills again, and then a little peacock herl, because you can't hurt a fly by putting peacock herl in it, just to imitate the thorax. So a common style on a scud hook over here. Again, often fished under a bung.
How heavy is that bead?
That bead is a 760. No, that'll be a 332nd on there. So about a 2 millimeter, I think.
Yeah.
Always get my. It's funny, in Canada we're metric like you, but our beads, I still speak in fractions, whereas my American friends are not metric standard, and they all talk in millimeters. So I've got to kind of do that trend. I think it's 2 millimeters is a 332nd. So could be wrong.
It looks about a 2 millimeter.
Yeah. I like them a little smaller on the buzzers so they don't overdo the fly. But we also fish a lot of white bead-headed patterns as well when there's lots of algae in the water, and the algae can foul up the gills. Because I notice a lot of your patterns, and I remember talking to others as well, that because of you've got a lot of algae in your waters, the breathers aren't as prominently imitated because they get all fouled up.
Yeah, we don't. To be fair, we don't bother with breathers.
Yeah.
Like that black one is the typical topography. It's just a UV resin or a advanced buzzer in black with a tag on it, and the tag is supposed to then represent a trigger point. So if you've got thousands of buzzers, for yours to stand out just a little bit, so the tag is there.
That's what we're doing. I think with our gills, they pop a little bit. They're a little, some component of the fly is a little more obnoxious, if you will, just sticks out and wants to get eaten. Okay, this one here is a fly mine called where did it go? The Fullback. And it's just a generic kind of scruffy looking nymph. Could be a lot, peacock curl. I tie it with dubbing, partridge hackle on there, little hot spots. It's just buggy and looks good to eat is sort of the basic. We tie it. I think the one I gave you is in probably a 10. Might be a little big.
Yeah, it's quite big, but it'll work. I'll easily work over here.
Here we've got dragonfly nymphs, caddis pupa, sedge pupa, scuds. It's just scruffy, and it's a fly I have a lot of confidence in. I'll fish it on a floating line, clearing. Typically, a figure of 8 hand twist retrieve with pauses just to cover water and find a fish. There's a lot of throat pumps here. After you catch a fish, you might throat pump them and see what they're on, and then refine your presentation from there. But it's just been a cornerstone pattern for me for many years. It's just generic and looks like many different things.
Exactly that, isn't it?
Yeah. So, what else have we got? Number 2. Oh, this one. I know you've got some scud, or you've got those killer gammarus, they call them, in some of the waters. Yeah. So this one's called an SLF, which stands for scud-like fly. It's just got a little bit of brill or straggle string for the body, CDC tail, a CDC hackle, and a soft hand hackle. And when it gets wet, it just slims. Can't get it to get wet, but it just buggy and impressionistic. And I've had good luck with this when they're on scuds in our lakes, right? As they're darting around. So
I fished this like a wet fly. I fished 2 of these, or I know you've sent me another one as well. I fished them on a fast intermediate or a sinking line, and I pulled them back very, very fast.
Yeah,
it's interesting that you said that about gammas. I didn't think of it like that, but it's really interesting to see how your approach to it is.
Yeah, it's the same. This one, the other one, while we're talking about, is an emerger called the I'll just pull it down so people don't see me reaching all over the place, and I'll put all these buttons to get everybody up on screen. This one, the other one, is kind of more of a tractor. I'll fish a lot of times sort of up near the surface when, I'll certainly fish it like you have with the clear intermediates, a little faster at times, whatever it takes. But this is just sometimes when they get up in the surface and they're just feeding up in that top 3 feet of water, it's just something buggy. It could be a kind of like not necessarily a hopper, but it's definitely gangly and looks like something drowned or didn't get emerged, or it's just some bug. It's just something that suggestive that covers the water.
Yeah, exactly that. We do fish stuff like this sometimes on some waters, but like you said, 2 of them pulled very fast, especially on wild brown trout. On a wild brown trout waters, this pattern and the last pattern you've showed, they work really, really well. Just pulling long 10-inch strips consistently. Mm-hmm. Have wild brown trout come up and take them.
Yeah, we don't have our brown trout tend to be. Our wild brown trout in my local waters tend to be in the rivers. Our browns tend to be stocked, so they start. They're a little more eating their bugs and bait fish kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So. All right, bring you back in. I don't see any more questions sitting there. All right, then we get into damsels. So this first one's called getting all beat up here, is called the pearly damsel. Where'd it go? And this is one I tend to use. It's a little more imitative. Mm-hmm. When the hatch is on and they're really tuned in, play it in different light colors like this. It could be a juvenile that's just shed its skin and is still quite bright. Tend to fish this clear intermediates, hovers, midge tips, in the shallows around weeds, things like that.
And how are you retrieving this normally?
Usually like a figure of 8, maybe 5 or 6 turns and a pause. Imitate it, wiggling along and then taking a break, and wiggling along and taking a break. Mm-hmm. That kind of presentation.
Yeah.
And then we've got the other one here as well, which is another damsel. It's a little more. This one's called the Striptease. It utilizes just a different approach to it. It's get this up here. Those eyes are knotted plush chenille or vanille. You tie them in little knots.
All right.
Yeah. It's on my YouTube channel, and it's just using the micro mink zonkers or a squirrel. Usually I use the mink because it seems to have lighter dyes to it. A squirrel is a little darker base. Mm-hmm. And when this gets wet, this just slicks right down. I don't want to get spit all over it, but it just really gets slender and swims well. right? It's got lots of movement in it.
Like a real damsel,
Yeah,
basically.
yeah. This is, and the eyes are simply a hot spot, right? Stand out. I like to fish if there's damsels around. Like to fish them as a searching pattern, we call it, when you're not sure what to put on. You're working around weed beds. They're a predator. They're always going to be on the hunt for something, so they tend to get themselves into trouble because they're swimming around and exposing themselves. But we like to, nice, slender, legs are all trapped in here, but nice, slender profile, because they're kind of a skinny bug. I always say their head is their widest part, so I like to keep these as slender as I can.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because there was a question here, I'll pull this one out, but people asking, Rhys, if you've got damsels in your lakes. I believe you do. I was hoping you do.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, we have. I think it's close to the middle of summer. We have about 3 to 4 weeks where damsels are very prominent. Damsel as a fly pattern itself, it's to be fair, it's one of the most conventional lures that we, or streamers, we use in the winter months. So when we go back to the cat's whisker, you've got the cat's whisker, you've got the damsel, but the damsel that we fish, I'd be butchering it if I said they look like a natural damsel. It's got bright orange head, it's got blue flash coming through it. It's a streamer in essence. That's what it is. So, but we do have about 3 to 4 weeks toward the middle of summer, I think it is, where we do get natural damsels, and the flies that you've mentioned here now, we target them really well, for example.
Yeah. I saw this question about rainbow dancers and candy floss booby point flies using fast glass. What way would you fish that cast?
I go to a rainbow dancer with a candy floss point fly using fast glass line. What way would you fish this cast? Rainbow dancer. What's a rainbow dancer? I don't know what a rainbow dancer is.
I think it's a UK pattern. It's
Oh, I know. Oh, sorry, I know what it is. It's a variation on a yellow dancer.
Yeah.
So that's really weird that you're fishing both of them together. Only because a candy booby it's a booby. It's a fly that looks really well for the washing line. It's a buoyant fly, and then a rainbow dancer, if I've understood this correctly, if it's like a yellow dancer, it's normally a weighted lure. So you've got one fly being buoyant and one fly being a weighted fly. If, in essence, what I would do is I would separate them, fish one by itself and the other by itself. Or if you're going to fish the candy booby, fish it with some nymphs. If you're going to fish the rainbow dancer, fish that by itself on a fast glass like a lure. So normal retrieves, fast figure of eights, slow figure of eights, count it down, work the depths, see what happens, basically.
Okay. All right. This one here is, somebody said if I had one fly, this would probably be it for, this is the balanced leech we talked about.
So I'm looking forward to really trying this fly. Yeah. I think it'll work really well with us.
Yeah. So you can fish this cast and stripped. A lot of people think this is just an indicator fly, but this, fish it with a gold bead, chartreuse, hot orange, it depends. This fly has been I've caught fish on this fly all over North America, into Argentina. It's the body is a material Arizona semi-seal, which is a mixture of nylon, mohair, and the Angelina fiber, which is a little sparkly, little highlights in it. And what we do is we put this in a dubbing loop, and once the fly's done, if you've got the time, you actually dip it in hot water, like microwave a glass of water for a minute, an hour. We'll have no water left, probably no microwave. That trains and straightens out because it's quite wiry dubbing, and that'll straighten it right out so it flows. So we tie these balance leeches. This is the original balance flies were tied on down eye hooks, and the extension in the front, this is a sequin pin that the bead is slid onto, so the hook actually ends about here. Right? This is an extension, and this is just, it has to be tungsten, and this just tips, equalizes the mass of the fly back here and tips the fly horizontal when you fish it with a non-slip loop knot, or your Davy knot would work too, and just hang it vertically and just let it sit. Half the time, just the chop on the surface animates this fly, and I have supreme confidence in that. I think we had a question that said, if we had one fly to use, this might be mine because it's just works so well.
So two questions.
Yeah.
Do you have a video on how to tie this fly on your channel?
Yeah. It's one of the first ones on my channel. It needs to be updated because I don't tie it on exactly the same hook or the same pin anymore, but the basic premise is the same. But I've got other balance flies on there that I do tie with these.
And then second question. So you said the body was made up of several fibers. Are they all synthetic, or is there any natural fiber in there?
No, this natural. This is black marabou for the tail.
Yeah, sorry,
Right?
I meant the body. Yeah.
In the body, I think mohair is a natural, isn't it? A natural material. I've gone blank again. And then the nylon just softens it up, and then the Angelina fiber is the little blue highlights. That's why it's called bruised, because it's black and blue, like if you got a bruise. But this fly has just worked so well for me all over the place, both under an indicator and cast and stripped. I've fished it lock style, particularly if the wind's up and I'm getting a faster drift and I need to get the flies down. This fly has worked very, very well for me over the years.
No, I'm looking forward to this one. I think this will catch pretty well. I'm saying this now, fingers crossed. I think it'll catch pretty quickly with us.
Yeah, no, it'd be good for your small still waters because we don't. Most of our lakes we fish out of. We just have too much vegetation around. Private land access. Too much soft muddy bottoms. If you wade in a little bit, you'll be up to your neck in mud. The weed growth around the edges, you can't get in. You got to be mobile and around there. I like some of those little fisheries you've got pegs you can fish off of. I know you and your dad did a competition there. Those look, I like fishing from shore. I just don't get to do it very often. So looking forward to that.
It's a different thing, isn't it? So
yeah.
With us, we've got the big reservoirs like you have. They're not as. They're a bit more nurtured in the way of they're maintained because they're privately run and so on and so forth. Yeah. But then we've also got a massive amount of these small fisheries. And this is where, in the UK, a lot of people learn to fish. And that's why they're popular, because they are well maintained. They are easy for someone to come along and try and fish in them.
Okay. All right. The last one was based on you have that back end fishery fishing, fry and minnows.
Yeah.
And we have that too. We probably don't have the same minnows, but this one is just a variation of a zonker style. The underneath of it is like a squirrel zonker, and behind, and then some like a pearl dubbing that will lead through. And the front hackle, this is just barge slapping, larger and just the right at the base of the feather, not up into the tip area, but into the softer portions. And then just stick some eyeballs on it, and it's just a good, fish just like any minnow fry pattern. Just strip the hell out of it and hang on.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. At the moment now, we're back end of last season now. Before obviously buzzers are here now, but up until recently, at the likes of Rutland and places like that, they were still using fry patterns and targeting brown trout and fishing. And like you said, literally. Pattern like this, that size, trying to represent the bait fish and fishing it for 7 hours straight and just trying to target the older resident browns in the lake.
Yeah, we in our lakes, and when I fished in British Columbia, there wasn't most of the fisheries there have been stocked and managed to be what they call monoculture, single, just rainbows in it primarily. But in my province, we have a lot of mixed fisheries with rainbows, brown trout, and tiger trout, which you got a great picture of one there, and they are stupid. We find them really aggressive.
Aren't they?
Yeah, and they love chasing. So we've got two main minnow species we have in our lakes called a brook stickleback and a fathead minnow that are both kind of olivey in coloration because they live tight against the weeds. If they get out into open water, they're toast. And you'll see the tigers and the browns particularly hurting them and slashing at them like you see in some of your reservoirs where they'll just ball them up and slash through them, which is really exciting fishing. So this is something fished, clear intermediate lines a lot of times because it's a shallow water stuff and keep the fly up so the fish can come from below it and destroy it. It's the hopeful plan.
No, I'm sure that'll work as well, to be fair. The fishery I'm going to take these two has a healthy population of brown trout. So I'd imagine that both the balance leech and that all in pattern should work.
The tiger should, wherever you got that tiger trout should.
Oh, that's 5 hours away. I'm not going back there for this video.
Geez, we drive 5 hours all the time. Like to get to the next province, I was thinking that, just before we logged on was, it's an 8-hour drive just to get there, and I'll drive 13 hours to go down to the States. It's just we got so much,
Yeah, not doing that.
Well, when you come over, you can sit and go to sleep in the seat and just listen to my classic rock and okay. What do we got? Some more questions, and then we'll go through the last couple of questions, and we'll let you get on your way because I appreciate that it's getting late there. What's this question? What would be a good lake in all the mentions to be in the Calgary area? Probably Police Outpost down that way would be a good lake, and then some of the ones up near Red Deer. Rhys has no idea what I'm talking about, but yes, some of those. You can also head a little bit north of there as well. I think we've touched most of the questions. There was a question about weather. I assume it said two lovely personalities I've seen, so I guess they like us, Rhys. Thanks for your tutorial. I have a question about pressure. Does this item, is it important to catch trout? Tips and tricks. I assume this to be meaning weather change and barometric pressure. What's your thoughts on that over there?
So we don't monitor barometric pressure for trout. We do it for bass. So striped bass, same thing. We do it for bass only because in bass fishing we measure everything. But we have tried to take more notice of what we assess for bass into trout, and it is working. But my father, Jeremy, he monitors barometric pressure, but I think we're still in the early stages yet, so we haven't learned enough about it. But what's your thoughts on it?
Well, we've lots of people believe, when it starts to drop rapidly, that the fish turn off and influence on the swim bladder. There's definitely, I find our fish in our lakes are sensitive to weather, but I think it's the entire change that goes on. The analogy I use is like the world's a little Christmas snow globe, and Mother Nature just gave it a really good rattle, and they're all kind of whoa, because what air temperature drops if it's a cold front coming in, light levels change, the wind churns things up, moves and distributes water, and their whole little world's just upset. And until things settle out again one way or the other, it can put them off. And we generally, in those situations, maybe don't fish as shallow. It's almost like they slide off into the deeper water a little bit to ride it out. Lots of conjecture whether they'll feed out there or not. I believe they feed out, as we talked earlier with zooplankton and Daphnia and chironomids. They'll certainly feed, but they certainly don't. They see something food-like going by, they'll have a go at it, right? So, Question about using fat. When do you use Fabs or Blobs exactly? I think we touched on that a little bit with zooplankton as attractors. Have we missed anything else?
Generally, like I said, if it's Daphnia around in the water, you'd fish those flies. If you're trying to fish, it depends on the method. If you're trying to fish high in the water, you will usually fish a washing line, depending on what line it is. But you'll fish a washing line, and then you'll have your booby or your fab on the point. So, if we look at the UK side of things, we fish if it's a washing line in the middle of spring or summer when we're trying to approach an imitative approach. There's a booby or a fab on the point, or if it's middle of winter or high summer when the fish are deep, we'll fish a J7 or a booby basher with a booby or a fab on the point. That's the two instances where we will fish in more often than not.
Have you got a favorite booby and fab?
Candy booby.
Yeah. That's the white with the pink, isn't it? It's kind of a...
Yeah, so it's powder, we call it.
Yeah,
it's powder marabou and then a pearl body.
Yeah.
That booby catches more fish in the UK than any other booby does.
Yeah. I've seen a lot. White eyes on it? White eyes?
Yellow.
Yellow, okay.
Yellow eyes. And then in terms of fabs, Craig Barr's candy fab is pretty... Actually, Ian Barr's, I'm not sure which bar. One of the Barr brothers... They have a candy fab, which is it's basically fluorescent yellow in the butt. That's Fritz now we're talking fluorescent yellow in the butt, and then like a powder pink in the front. Not fuchsia. It's like a baby light pink.
Yeah. Okay.
they call it a candy fab, and it's very, very good.
Okay. All right. Oh, there's somebody here asking questions of you. Do you do grease when dry fly fishing with Fuller's Earth? If so, what would your recipe be?
I degrease. We make our own. It's very simple to make
Yep.
your own Fuller's Earth. All you need is some actual Fuller's Earth, which you can buy on eBay or something like that.
Yeah.
Very liquid, and some glycerin, I think it is, and some water. So
Yeah.
we make our own, make a big batch of it. It lasts. I haven't made it for 4 years. It's still going for the last batch. So yeah, we do and make our own. Very simple.
Yeah, you're using Fuller's Earth, dishwashing liquid, and a little bit of glycerin. Is that true? Yeah. And just mix it into a paste. There was a video, I think.
So Tim Joyce.
Tim Joyce, yeah, that's where I saw it. Did a good job of mixing it up.
So Brian, you might want to check that out. It's Tim Joyce Fly Fishing Essex.
Yeah, Fly Fishing Essex on YouTube. He's got that. He's got that in there. Okay. I think we crashed through all those flies. I'm really excited about trying them. Be sure, again, Rhys, I can't thank you enough. We're going to do a draw. We got 19 people in here, so I am just going to try this share screen thing. This ought to be an adventure. Share screen so people can see. I'm just going to bring this up and come back. I got to push buttons here to make things appear. Share. All right. It's being goofy on me. It's not letting me share for some reason. It wants me to add permissions, and I'm not getting in there. So you're going to have to trust me. So we had 19 people. I'm using Google random number generator. I spin it. It's number 14, which question 14 was from... Oh, hello. Nice to hope to meet you. The boss has shown up. Guess it's time to go. Hello. Barajas Rodeo, who asked his question. That's brilliant. When do you change from a sinking line to a floating line was his question. I don't even think we talked about that. I think we sort of did. It's all based on where they are in the water column.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Oh, that was funny. I love that. Everybody's watching us laugh here. All right, so I'll reach out to Barajas Rodeo, who put a question in from Instagram. And again, I want to thank everybody who participated today, who asked the questions, got involved. Again, if you missed this or came in halfway through, or you want to send somebody else, hopefully you say a friend, you need to see this. If you go to my Phil Rowley Facebook page, Phil Rowley Fly Fishing Facebook page, or my YouTube channel, a recording of this will be there. By all means, you've got to follow Rhys's YouTube channel if you haven't. He's got some fantastic videos there that are educational, deal with common problems we find on lakes, some great fly tying, a little bit of river. I think there was a question, Rhys, too, about your best river fly for brownies.
Oh, threaded nymph.
Yeah. So for me here, we do a lot of Euro nymphing, so it'd be similar, a threaded nymph or something simple that gets down quick and we can tumble amongst them. So yeah, Rhys, this has been fun. I'm really looking forward to playing around with these flies. And now that the pandemic's over, it may be time to think about maybe next year figuring out how we can get into each other's waters, because I'd love to come and fish some of you, Rutland, Chew, Blagden, all over. I'm going to make you drive 5 hours.
We've got family. So I've got family in Canada, in Newfoundland, and then my partner, who you just saw, she has family in Vancouver. So
perfect, yeah.
So we'll probably in the next 5 years, I will probably be coming to Canada. So when that happens, I will drop you a message and we'll organize something.
Obviously, that's something. We've got a room in our house. We've got a big house. Lots of beer, so you'll have a good time. We might get to fish. We might just sit around and crack jokes all day long. So anyway, I guess that's it. I want to thank everybody who tuned in, who put the discussion on. There's lots of some great compliments here that people are enjoying the discussion. It's great to see how our waters differ, are similar, and our approaches to things. I encourage people, particularly in North America where I am, to really follow that. Maybe I shouldn't encourage them to follow, because I get some neat things out of there. And this is the question we always get. So Rhys, you get this one too. Is if I had only if I only had to fish one fly, part of me, I got to admit, Dutch fly fisher, I'm not a fan of this question because I tend to look at it a little bit like how long's a piece of string. There's so many, it just depends, right? But for me, that balanced leech in bruised has been a real performer for me over the year. Maybe that one, definitely it tends to be on there first time out. If I'm fishing under the bung or stripping or whatever to catch a fish, I might tune things in from there. I don't know. What about you, Rhys? What would yours be? Do you have is it fair to pick a favorite?
I'd probably say Dialbach. Winter, it can be quite hard, but the amount of fish that we can catch from spring till November on Dialbach, there's very few flies that can beat it in terms of its suggestive nature.
Yeah, no, I love it too. It's just, and of course, if you look online, like at Ian Flash Attack Flies, Ian's site, and I think you've got some flies as well. There's so many variations of a Dialbach. It's unbelievable.
So there's tons.
It's like how many variations of a buzzer are there? It's just bazillions. So
exactly.
So all right, well, we'll let Rhys go because it's late. Yeah, it's just starting to go. So anyway, I want to thank everyone. Again, it'll be recorded after. So thanks, everybody. Get out on the water if you can, or if you're like me, wait patiently. The ice will be leaving soon. Take care, everyone. Stay safe.
Thank you. Bye.